Rates, policy forms, and availability vary by state. Did you know that life insurance rates are near record lows? If you own life insurance or are thinking of buying any, why spend more than you have to? I'm Byron Udell, founder of AccuQuote. Since 1986, we've helped hundreds of thousands of people just like you save a fortune on their life insurance. Here's how we do it. We monitor the products offered by dozens of the most well-respected brand-name life insurance companies you trust so that you get the lowest rates. For example, a healthy 40-year-old can buy $500,000 of 10-year level term for less than $21 a month. 20 and 30-year rates are also available. And don't forget to ask us about the new term life plans that guarantee your money back even if you don't die. Take 5 minutes and call AccuQuote for your free quote at 800-654-2075. Find out how much you can save on your life insurance. Call AccuQuote today at 800-654-2075. That's 800-654-2075.
Blog Talk Radio.
West Coast and good afternoon, East Coast. We're back at you. This is Blog Talk Radio's Raise the Bar in real estate. This is Todd Waller, and the host of the show, Mr. Michael McClure, is hanging around here. And just letting you know, over in the screen room, if you will, learn something frightening about Michael's caffeine intake. Not that we already didn't know about it, but this explains the brightness in the horizon over in that neck of the woods. How you doing there, Mike?
I am doing great. Can you hear me, Todd?
I can hear you wonderfully.
We have this new, I don't know what they call it. It's a Blog Talk Radio studio. I know you're looking at the same thing I am. And It looks physically very different from what we've had in the past. And It shows me as not being on air. So I'm hoping that everybody can hear us.
I've got you here twice, actually, so this one's working.
Oh, okay. Should I call in from another line and use it as well? And also, I think we lost Matthew.
No, I'm still showing him.
No, he's still here? Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm just confused. I'm just very confused today. And, we're going to have Matthew Shadbold again on the show today for the third time, which just speaks to how much this guy knows about how many different things. And I think we've already probably have 2 or 3 other shows sort of tentatively in mind behind this one with him because he just knows so much about so many things that it's hard not to have him on air. And before we get to that, let's talk quickly about a couple of other things that are kind of exciting. One is at Professional One, we've been doing this ROI of social media video series all month. In fact, we're just about to wind it down. Matthew made a fantastic contribution. In fact, he was one of the first contributors. You can check his video out on our blog at p1fran.com. But that's been really cool because I don't know about you, Todd. You can talk when I'm done blabbering here. But I've learned so much from so many of these people, and I think we tend to think that we kind of know. I don't want to say it all, but we kind of know a lot. And then you hear someone like, for instance, Matthew, or today, a perfect illustration, Jeff Turner, who is at ResPrez on Twitter, provided a 5-minute and 20-second video that I think I've watched now at least 10 times, and it's just so chock full of wisdom and insights gained over years of being in social media, years before I was, for example. And it's just been phenomenal to learn what we've learned. Would you agree with that, Todd, or what are your observations?
I would definitely, and I think, Mike, what we're running into is, I want to say, a jadedness of just being in the industry and rubbing elbows. I think that's a consequence of rubbing elbows with folks that are smarter or have a good grasp of something or an aspect of something that we're just not up on. And I love having the ability to see that. I think Jeff Turner's ResPrez's video today was one of those moments for me where I went, wait a minute, I'm connected with this guy and have the ability to chat with him nearly directly on things like this. And these are his thoughts on social media, on the return on investment conversation. So I think the jadedness, if you will, comes as a result of familiarity, but at the same time, I love events like this, having the videos come through. It opens your eyes again. It kind of rubs off that shine of jadedness, if you will, and goes, oh, yeah, all right, there is more stuff out here for us to stare at. It's good stuff, too.
It's amazing, and not only that, but I think that one thing that many people kind of get, I don't want to say confused about, that's not the right way of saying it. I guess maybe what you just said, the jadedness of it, is that when you're an early adopter or a relatively early adopter, we tend to take a lot of things for granted. And there's still a lot of people out there who are just coming into this whole social media thing or haven't been in it very long. And so I think, if I had any criticism of anything that Jeff Turner said, it's that his perspective is one of the earliest adopters. So when he said in the video that he can't really believe why we're still having this conversation, that's the only thing I disagreed with him about, is that there are still so many people that are new to this that are just coming in and thinking these things that we're trying to address in the video series. But in any event, his contribution was fantastic, and I would urge, in fact, if you would, Todd, could you tweet that or put that in the chat room just so anybody who hasn't watched it can watch it? Also, just real quickly, Inman News announced yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, but they're coming out with a next thing, and it's not clear on what that is. Chris Smith has joined Inman as their chief evangelist, and given that we're friends with Chris, we've been given a little bit of insight into what's going on at Inman, but nothing's gone public yet. And I know that Chris and Katie Lance and everybody else at Inman has some pretty powerful stuff up their sleeves, and I think they're going to be rolling it out. I think it's set on July 11th or mid-July at some point. So for those of you who know Chris or Katie or Inman, please look for that because I'm sure it's going to be exciting. And then finally, Inman Connect San Francisco kicks off, I believe it's exactly 1 month from today. And for anybody out there listening who's never been or is thinking about going, I would really implore you to go. Todd, you and I went last year, I'll never forget. I will never forget the time that we had there, the people that we met, the evening we spent at that place called Swig.
Yep.
With Nicole and Reggie and so many other great people. And so anybody out there thinking about going to Inman, I would strongly suggest that you do it. And we hope to meet many of you while we're there. So those things being said, let's grab Matthew because I know we have a lot to discuss with him, and he always has more to say than we have time for him to say it.
Well, you want to talk about rubbing elbows with giants. Here we go. Hey, Matthew, how are you doing this afternoon?
Hello, guys. How are you?
We are great, sir. We're just delighted to have you back for round 3 of Raise the Bar Radio. I think we're loosely discussing a name change on the show to Corcoran Raise the Bar Radio because you've become our all-time greatest guest, Matthew. We just come right out and say it. So thank you again for joining us. I know we asked you to do this last time. I'm going to ask you to do it again just because I'm sure there's somebody listening today who isn't familiar with you. So just a real quick thumbnail overview of who you are for any of our new listeners, please.
No problem. My official title here is the Director of Interactive Product and Marketing, and I work for Manhattan and Brooklyn's largest real estate brokerage, which is the Corcoran Group. We have about 2,000 agents, and last year we did $13 billion in sales. We also have a presence, pretty significant footprint in the east end of Long Island, so that's the Hamptons, what we call the Hamptons and the North Fork, and also Shelter Island. And we also cover markets in Palm Beach down in South Florida. I'm responsible for anything digital and interactive that touches the customer. So from our main website through to the syndication of the listings, working with all the ad partners, social, mobile, video, and anything else that we might do here locally in the city, from interactive touchscreens in the back of taxi cabs to touchscreen windows in our offices to interactive billboards in Times Square. So anything digital and interactive that touches the customer from Corcoran falls to me and my team.
And without being overly redundant, because I don't want to repeat things that have been said on your previous visits, but please check out our archive shows of Matthew's first 2 visits, and you can learn a lot about a number of topics that we've discussed with him previously. So we're going to skip that and just refer you to those archived episodes. But today's primary topic, because I'm sure we're going to cover more than this, But today's primary topic is mobile. And you and I had a sort of a private conversation recently, Matthew, in which you just kind of blew my mind with your strategies for things like Foursquare and Gowalla. And before we drill down too deeply into those details, let's just start with some basics. Why do you think mobile is important to the real estate industry?
I think it's actually a lot simpler than people think. I think, people get caught up in thinking about, we're in the location business and, mobile is a good fit if you're thinking about location marketing and things of that nature. But the main reason that I think it's important is because I think it's really going to be sort of the future of what the web is. And, I think there's pretty compelling arguments and data that suggest that the use of the web is increasingly going to be on handheld devices and less so the big gray box in the corner of your desk. So when we're thinking about mobile, sure, we're thinking about location marketing and, what's around me and, how you do a search based on using GPS technology and things like that. But more importantly, it's really where we see the web is going to primarily be interacted with. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I believe it was yesterday, Jimmy Mackin, the MLS app, put out a post on Facebook with a graphic from some source called Flurry, and it was I'm actually looking at it right now, and it was a graph that's entitled U.S. Mobile Apps versus Web Consumption Minutes Per Day, and it's comparing the web with mobile apps. And in December of 2010, the web was a little bit ahead of mobile apps, and in June of 2011, mobile apps have eclipsed the web. So I think that's statistical confirmation of what you just said.
Yeah, Flurry's always an interesting set of data to look at. Flurry.
For those of us who don't know what that is, could you explain that?
It's in-app tracking of activity, primarily for iPhone apps. I think they have some coverage in Android and like other things as well, but they're sort of like a Google Analytics for your iPhone app. And we have reporting for the Corcoran app that uses Flurry, and it's an interesting set of data, especially geographic data. It's actually very interesting from a geographic perspective to see where people are using the app. It's a fascinating statistic, and whether it is the kind of tipping point that I think everybody's been predicting for so long, I think has yet to shake out. It's really just 1 month. 1 month's worth of data that is suggesting that, app use is bigger than the desktop. I remain to be convinced about how powerful that kind of thing is going to be, but I do think it's an encouraging sign that those predicting, the future of the web being on mobile devices and inside apps is coming, if not here already.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that, Matthew, because Chris Anderson of the Longtail fame wrote on Wired, what was it, back in August last year. In fact, the title of the post was "The Web is Dead, Long Live the Internet," and he posits basically the same thing. And this is, again, a gut instinct backed up with, obviously, a bit of data, not as much as what Flurry is bringing with the in-app data. But he was saying back then, almost a year ago now, that he saw that this was the direction that people were going, not just on handhelds, but specifically accessing information in, I guess, what you would call silos on the Internet, being the application that allows you to access the information that you're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately apps in whatever form, whether that's a web app or an actual app, they're really just conduits to connect with the web. So I think, from what I understand of that Flurry data, outside of that graph, a lot of it is being fueled by social right now. The Twitter and Facebook and YouTube apps in particular, which shouldn't really come as any surprise in terms of minutes, I think. Right. But I'd be very interested to see if they ever release, a more sort of detailed breakdown of something like that, especially worldwide.
Yep.
Well, and when I look at the data, and again, there were actually three data points provided: June of 2010, which I didn't mention when I was summarizing it, December of 2010, and June of 2011, and the trend is fairly obvious. And again, I agree with what you said there, Matthew, that it's a fairly limited body of or population of data. But nonetheless, I personally think, from just my own anecdotal perspective, that this trend is fairly obvious, and I think you do too, based upon the remainder of what I'm sure you're going to share with us as we continue this conversation. So my next question to you is, what is Corcoran doing in the location-based marketing space?
We do a lot. We do a lot of different things. We think it's very, very important to the future of our digital business. And the main things that we do is we have an iPhone app that is about 2 years old now. And if I can give you guys an exclusive, we have a new update for the app that just got released 1 hour ago. So it's now live in the App Store. So I can give you guys the exclusive on that. Bigger photos, more interactivity, social sharing, a lot more content rich, a lot more visual, and a lot more fun. So that's a big enhancement that actually just went into the iPhone app for us today. We also have an Android app, and we do significant location-based marketing to drive downloads of both of those apps inside of other apps. So we advertise inside of like the New York Times app or the Wall Street Journal app, or even places like the Zillow app. So that when you're in New York having a coffee, for example, and you're in a certain location, you can be prompted based on where you are that there's like an open house nearby you, as well as the means to kind of get that through the Corcoran app itself. So we're doing what they call location targeting to drive downloads of our apps and just sort of general awareness of our mobile services. And the sort of third part of this is that we have more a kind of extension of our social media location-based marketing, where we have programs inside of Foursquare, Gowalla, and Food Spotting. So it's really sort of a three-pronged animal, really. It's really the two apps themselves for Android and iPhone, the social-based location marketing inside of Foursquare, Gowalla, and Food Spotting, and then the actual advertising and promotional campaigns inside of other apps.
That's a large agenda that you guys have there, and amazing. And when I look around, and I'm certainly, we certainly in our limited view of things and our limited knowledge of things, certainly don't know everything that everybody's doing. But when I look at Corcoran Group and everything you just said, I mean, how many other brands are out there doing this kind of stuff? I mean, it's not a lot. And again, I just want to we want to tip our hat to you for the great work that you're doing with all of that stuff, because I know we watch all this stuff and we're just trying to play catch up with you, quite frankly. So great job. What kind of results have you seen from these various strategies that you're implementing?
Well, one of the great things that we see sort of specifically with the iPhone, if we just sort of focus on the iPhone, for example, you can't underestimate putting a real estate search experience in someone's hand that is a phone. And one of the key statistics that we see, even outside of the strict lead generation strategy of putting a phone in someone's hand around search, is that our iPhone app users are actually like our power users. They use the app about 4 times longer on average per user than they do on the desktop version of our website, which is a fantastic statistic for us, because it means that we're essentially sort of creating a compelling experience in mobile, which is great for us, because it means that they look at more things and they stay longer. And it's something that we're very interested in at the moment, the amount of time that people spend with us as a brand. whether that's in social or mobile or on our website or watching videos or whatever it is, the amount of time that someone spends with you is increasingly valuable in a period of time where people's attention span is kind of at an all-time low.
Absolutely.
So we think that this idea that people are like our power users, spending a lot of time with us in mobile, is very, very powerful for us. We're also finding it incredibly helpful to understand how the mobile user differs from that of the desktop user. And we're also even seeing differences between iPhone and Android now. So we think that we're sort of on this path of educating ourselves towards how people are going to interact with our services in the future. So, for example, we have Google Analytics across, our desktop website, our iPhone app, and our Android app. So we can cross-compare things, which is an amazing thing to be able to pull a report for. So one of the things that we see is, which is fascinating to us, is that like Android users tend to do more searches for sales listings, whereas iPhone tends to be a little bit more on the rental side. So it allows us to kind of finesse the content of the apps themselves and tailor, in-app promotions and the kind of content around what the audience are doing and what they're telling us. And, we think that level of insight into the mind of the mobile consumer, if you like, is a really, really important thing for future-proofing our digital business. Much more so than understanding the desktop user. We have a really deep understanding, as most people do, of what people do on the web. But where it's sort of embryonic at the moment is understanding like how people interact with advertising, how people interact with social, and how people interact with apps, real estate apps in particular, on the phone. There's very little reporting being shared about that, other than this kind of top level, like we were talking about before, this top level, people are spending more time here. So we're more interested in sort of how that specifically drills down to finding real estate. We know that people spend a lot of time there because we see it too, but we're more interested in kind of like, what are people in Park Slope doing? Or what are people doing on the Upper East Side, and what are they looking at, and where are they when they look at that kind of stuff? So we think that, in terms of results, just internal education has been absolutely seismic for us. And, in terms of actual lead generation, calls and emails and sharing into our agent community has been very, very positive as well.
Well, that's fantastic, and as I get to know you better, all of this must be sort of a kid in a candy store experience for you, because clearly you have such an aptitude for all of this stuff, and lots of what you say, I have to be honest with you, it's just so sophisticated relative to my own personal understanding of all this stuff that I just marvel at your level of knowledge. It's stunning, and so your strategy, and I don't want to take us off topic, but I just wanted to reiterate one thing that we have talked about before that I believe is just really, really important to mention, at least for another minute or two, is your strategy with regard to not really selling anything. With respect to the videos that you have on your YouTube channel, for example, I keep watching your videos. I subscribe to your YouTube channel, so I watch all your videos, and I watched some guy the other day talking about why people rent in the Hamptons and how do you do it and that kind of thing. And I just continue to be fascinated by this whole strategy that you use. And you probably said all there is to say about it, but I don't see you changing that approach anytime soon, are you?
No, we're very comfortable with how that product is growing and developing at the moment. I mean, one of the big differences I think in our approach seems to be that we think of video more as an extension of social than we do of search. I think a lot of folks in real estate think of video as an extension of search and that it somehow always has to be content associated with a listing. So that's why you see, home tours and neighborhood bios and things of that nature. I think it's fair to say that most real estate video is usually listing centric. But for us, we think it's more helpful to provide video content that answers questions, is useful, is helpful, can be fun at times, and can be repopulated and shared, in many, many different places. It's very difficult to apply that description to a listing video, I think. And, for us, what we found that we built is a vast library of answers. And I don't think you can underestimate, how helpful something like that can be. And we make sure that we're looking at all of the data associated with our viewership. We pay particularly close attention to what goes on YouTube in terms of how people are sharing things, where they're coming from, how long they're watching, and things like that. And now we're starting to integrate the video platform into the app. So we know that people spend a lot of time in the app. We know that people spend a lot of time watching our videos. So we're actually, over the summer, we're going to be basically blurring those two platforms today, starting with the update that we just released. You'll see a lot more video within the app. So if somebody's in Soho and they're looking for, open houses near where they are right now, they can do a search, but they'll also have the ability to watch a clip of our, local Soho office manager talking about what's hot in Soho right now. So
that's cool.
We think that, it's just another layer of value that you put around search that isn't just pages and pages of listings.
Yeah, and I love and again, I don't know if this is your specific strategy. This is just my personal observation based on the last probably 15 videos that I've watched from the Corcoran Group, but they all seem to fit this description. They're about a minute. They cover one fairly narrow topic or answer one fairly narrow question.
Yeah, we see power in simplicity of those things.
Yeah. And I do too, because they're just so easy to digest. They make an impression, and they don't drone on so long that even quality content. Sometimes I think people's attention spans are so short these days that you just run the risk of people just look and see how long is this video before they even click it. And I think there's some people out there who.
I'm very interested in this idea of attention span as a marketer, because I think that advertisers and marketers are having to become increasingly creative in their efforts to gain people's interest. So I think, in many respects, one of the advantages of doing it in the way that we're doing it is that we're able to separate ourselves from a lot of the noise that you see with other real estate video. And I think that aspect of differentiation is very, very important. Because it allows us to separate, signal from noise, to use the same analogy. And I think that, you and I have had many conversations about production quality and, essentially what makes something good as regards to video. And I think that, doing something that nobody else does in a digestible, fun, and ultimately useful way is a great place to start.
Absolutely. In fact, you sort of stole my thunder, because my next point was going to be, I've read so many things in the last couple of years about differentiation. Various books. Differentiate or Die is one that comes to mind quickly. And you really have done a great job of that with the whole tone and tenor of your YouTube videos, and the fact that they aren't they aren't about listings, or at least they don't. The ones I've seen aren't, and they're different. The production value is exceptional. In fact, there's only two that I can think of, only two companies that I can think of that are putting out production values in the upper echelon, and that's you and Houlihan Lawrence. I don't know how much you know about them, but I've watched some of their videos recently, and they're very high production value as well, clearly using professionals. And you're right. We have had this conversation before, and I don't mean to continue off in this tangent, but I really do think it's important. I think consumers prefer it, and even though I know there's a lot of people, perhaps even some listening to this call, who are recoiling right now, I feel this trend happening, which is out with the Blair Witch, and end with professionalism and high quality. And I think it's sort of I read a post on Inman the other day, Matthew. You and I had a very brief exchange about it, and then I went on and had a series of other brief exchanges with other people who we're friendly with, and pretty much everybody had the same reaction. And I don't want to call out the person that wrote it, but the gist of it was classic, old school Blair Witch type production values are just fine, so don't worry about it. And I think my personal view, and again, I want to make clear that this is just my view, is that was true last year, the year before, but I can feel it shifting. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matthew, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and think that you're going to agree with me that the higher the production value, the better.
Well, I think if you characterize it in terms of people's attention span, if you have a climate where people are overloaded with things and already have far too much content thrown at them every single day than they could possibly consume, then they get really good at finding value in things and paying attention to the things that they're interested in and tuning everything else out very, very quickly. And I think one of the ways that you're going to be able to separate all the sort of poorly produced things from the well-produced things is with this idea of expertise. I think this idea of not necessarily professionalism, that would not be a word that I would use there, but I think people ultimately are gravitating towards expertise. And you see this happening in journalism as well. Like, it's not enough to be a good writer. You have to be an expert on the topic as well. And that's really what people are kind of pulling towards, I think. It's not how well you make things, although that is very, very important. And I think the production value lends itself to the value of positioning yourself as an expert. But it's also the content itself is very, very important. And, it's the two together that I think ultimately kind of separates you. And there are many people starting to work with this idea of, differentiated expertise, doing something that nobody else does. And you see it within real estate. There's small pockets of online real estate people that are completely differentiated experts at what they do. And you could, even in very simple form, characterize it by city. You could say, who is the Phoenix guy? Right? And yep. Somebody would come to mind. Who is the person in Austin? And somebody would come to mind. And all across the city, they're starting to appear to be like these pockets of people. And what these people are doing is exactly what I'm describing. They're differentiating themselves not only through local expertise, but in terms of approach. They're actually doing unique things. And I think that this is really going to be something that we see a lot more of as a way for people to drown out all of the stuff that they're overloaded with.
Interesting. So let's go back and wrap up the mobile point. There was just one more question I had, and I'm sorry that I took us off on that tangent. But where do you think all of this mobile stuff is heading in general?
I think we're going to see a lot. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. It seems like you can't turn on the TV without seeing an ad for the Droid or the iPhone, I think. So there's certainly there's no slowdown of it. one of the things that we are very excited about here in New York is there's a big push for access here in New York. We have a new digital officer that's actually now working in Mayor Bloomberg's office. She's a fantastic resource for the city, and her name is Rachel Stern. She's well worth doing a search for on Google, because she has fantastic insight into the sort of digital future of cities. And one of the things that the city just did here is that they released a 40-page roadmap of how they think the interactive future of New York is going to play out, and ultimately kind of what government here is going to do about it. And it's a fascinating document, because one of the key things that they stress is how important it is to look after the digital spaces just as much as the public spaces. So when they're talking about restoration and maintenance of the New York Public Library, for example, they're just as much talking about its website as well. They're lumping the two things together and making sure that like parks, for example, have full Wi-Fi access provided by the city. And I think that access points are going to become a very critical point for a move towards the cloud, if you like. I mean, we don't have access here in the subway in New York, and I think it's a huge pain for a lot of people. I'm always sort of baffled that there's all these QR codes and URLs being thrown at us in all of the subway advertising here in New York, and absolutely no way to access them. Jeff Turner and I were actually looking at something in Korea last night that was using scannable codes for being able to do your grocery shopping while you were waiting for the subway. So you could say, you could pick up something and do your weekly shopping using your phone and scanning things on the side of the subway station, and then have it delivered, either later that day if you were doing it in the morning, or the following day if you were on your way home. And that kind of like problem solving by using technology and access through a mobile device, I think is going to be a lot more of what we see. So I think that's one direction that it's possibly headed.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what a cool analogy, what a cool story of the scanning of groceries. And so many of these ideas, when you hear them, don't you have this reaction? God, that was so obvious.
I think in many ways those are the best ideas, and I think one of the things that we lose sight of in the real estate industry in particular is what everyone else is doing. Like what is the food industry doing? What is the news industry doing? And I think we talk a lot about this kind of stuff at Corcoran is looking outside of real estate for our inspiration for what to do, because that's real people solving sort of genuine problems. And I think that is hugely beneficial, rather than sort of going down the rabbit hole of real estate people just talking to other real estate people. We're very spoiled here in New York in that we have a lot of things to look at outside of real estate and be inspired by. And I think that kind of thing is really important. I think it is important to look at what Netflix is doing with movies, because there's parallels for what we're thinking about with real estate and things like that. So using case studies from other content verticals, I think is a really good way to spend your kind of research time, rather than looking at what another brokerage in another city is doing.
I think that's a great point, and I think that we meaning the industry at large, absolutely has that kind of blinders on most of the time. And I think that probably, my company, our company is guilty of that too. We tend to look around and see what other people are doing and compare ourselves to them, that's a great point that probably we should be looking outside at what other industries are doing, because the reality is, let's be honest, at least in my opinion, for the most part, I think real estate is a step behind. Nobody calls real estate a cutting edge industry. At least I don't think they do. For every Corcoran group that is on the cutting edge, there are 1,000 other companies that aren't, quite frankly. So
we might be the dull edge.
Well, I just hope we're not the tail. And I'm
you guys
confident we're not.
You guys do great work, and you should be congratulated on that. But and I think you're widely recognized for pushing the conversation forward, as you rightly should be, because I think it's fantastic what you guys do. But I think in terms of how you think about your competition, I think the nature of competition has changed. Because if you take something like Facebook, for example, I keep coming back to this idea of sort of overload of information. Your competition isn't the rival brokerage across the street for people, in terms of actual, eyeballs and attention. Your competition is everybody else in the news feed from the person that follows you. Does that make sense? So you
Absolutely.
are competing for placement amongst all of those people's friends. So, if you're, we tend to characterize this in terms of like blasting out listing information and stuff. That isn't a competitive strategy inside of a news feed of other people's friends. And in order to be competitive, you have to do kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of differentiation, usefulness, fun, and ultimately, I believe, something beautiful. I mean, we've seen, fantastic success with just posting like one amazing picture of something. Like we had a very, very important decision on same-sex marriage here over the weekend, and on our Facebook fan page, we posted a picture of the Empire State Building that was lit up in all the rainbow colors. Now, when we think about how we post that, we're posting it to our page. But the majority of where that post is visible, the majority of times that post is visible is inside of news feeds. So the more people that see it inside of a news feed, that's where the sharing and the commenting happens, much more so than on our page itself. So, we're looking at sort of those kind of specific examples of, the kind of things that you're talking about here.
You had a photo gallery a couple of days ago. I don't recall what it was called, a walk down 8th Avenue or something like that. And it was just full of these stunning photos of, I'm not even sure what those things were, to be honest with you, because I didn't look at it very long, be candid. But I do remember this. I do remember thinking these photos are stunning. And I just know from, I've gained a lot of experience and knowledge about Facebook literally in the past couple of months because we finally turned our attention to it, started paying attention to what you're doing, Matthew, at Corcoran, had the good fortune of befriending Jimmy Mackin, who's doing some amazing things with Facebook and just has an outrageous amount of knowledge for someone as young as he is. And so, we kind of think we're behind the curve, but absolutely catching up. And when I see the kinds of things that you're doing, like that photo gallery, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, we posted a number of pictures to our Facebook gallery, basically between sort of 32nd Street and 59th Street on 8th Avenue here in New York.
And they were just gorgeous photos. And, the fact that I have that recall of that, it's just, that's something I'll probably think about 6 months from now, just randomly. And it's those little bits of not mind share, I don't know what term you use for it, mental space that you take up in people's minds that, you have overwhelmed me personally with what you've done online and in social media, so that when I think New York real estate, I just think Corcoran Group. It's a knee jerk. It's Pavlovian at this point. And doesn't that say something?
I mean, that's very much sort of, I wouldn't say that that's our strategy, but that's a wonderful conclusion to have people make independently of us telling them that. I mean, I think that, just to give some context on where that photo gallery came from, We have a strategy at the moment that is geared towards trying to make everything that we do more visual. If you think about a lot of things that you do in social and in location-based marketing, a lot of it is really just text. So we have a strategy of leaving, venue tips in Foursquare and venue tips in Gowalla and things like that. But now we're associating photos with them, and high-quality photos that are just taken with an iPhone, but there's a little bit of post-production work that takes place on them to make them appear like they do. And also, that is trying to translate through to Twitter and Facebook. And anybody that really kind of follows us will have seen us starting to post more photos. So it's really an extension of what we're doing in location-based marketing around town anyway. We're just now taking a picture, when we're leaving a highlight associated with a venue. And our Gowalla presence in particular is like a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've I don't know how much you're comfortable with me sharing about what you taught me sort of privately last week or whenever that was, and I'm not even really asking, I guess, that question. But when you explained to me, the strategy that you see for something like Gowalla, and I got it, because prior to that point, I think it was probably clear to you that I didn't get it, because I think I told you that I didn't get it, and we'd had several prior very brief exchanges about Foursquare, and I've always had this attitude about those kinds of technologies, as I would summarize as, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know why people do it. And then you sort of enlighten me, and now, I'm taking 100 photos every time I walk my dog, and that's not an exaggeration. I've taken 300 photos in one walking trip. I have 1,000 photos, no exaggeration, 1,000 photos that I've taken that are worthy of publication, that I've just got stockpiled for future, paced out publication, so that our vision is that, and granted, comparing our town to Manhattan is a joke. What we want to do is, we want to just dominate our town on a digital level, like you guys are striving to do in Manhattan. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for what you taught me in that conversation.
You're very welcome. I mean, I think what we do is actually very simple. The idea of sort of digital ownership of a city is on the one hand a lot of fun to do, but it's also tremendous brand recognition stuff. And I sort of firmly believe that nobody knows local markets and neighborhoods better than real estate agents. And all we're really doing is sort of leveraging that in digital form. Through photos, through videos, through venue tips, through status updates, and all the different kind of media that we have available to us. It's just a way of sort of leveraging expertise. That's really all that it is, I think. But to be able to do that, I think it's an idea that actually applies to any market.
Matthew, I'm the slow one in this conversation, and I'm still hung up on the comment maybe about 5 minutes ago about the battle is not, quote unquote, for leads; it's for attention in the news feed. I think that is what you have just walked through with regards to the photos that Mike has brought up, and the walk down 8th Avenue, for example. That is something that in somebody's news feed or a friend's news feed, I could very easily, and I could see myself stopping and staring, and if I repeatedly saw something like that in my own news stream or somebody else's news stream, I would begin to do exactly as Mike did. I would start associating that location with whomever was supplying those images, or fill in the blank. It doesn't even have to be images. It could be some great piece of content. But what you've done is you have owned photos, images with a certain style, and you are infiltrating, if you will, folks' news feeds with that wonderful representation. And as Mike articulated, when he thinks New York, he thinks Corcoran. I cannot believe that he is the only person that has that image stuck in his head or that association stuck in his head as a result of your efforts.
Well, we hope not. I mean, that's having people share that information amongst themselves, like I said before, independently of us, is fantastic. And the idea of what we do with photography isn't something that we have sort of particularly seen in Facebook. But Facebook is really just a curated version of what we're doing on the phone. The phone is really where it lives and breathes. And we're really just sort of housing groups of those photos in these Facebook galleries. So, for example, like we may have checked in, at 2 or 3 places along 8th Avenue. So that would be maybe like the New York Times building. What else is on 8th Avenue? Like Port Authority, the Port Authority big bus terminal in New York where all the buses come in. Something on 42nd Street, something like that. And we're using those photos to help people understand and sort of curate this experience of sort of life around the city by sort of leaving these digital breadcrumbs in as many places as we possibly can. And the more helpful we can make them, so much the better. But very often those photos aren't used on Facebook. And yesterday is actually a really great example of one. We took a picture. We're in Central Park, and we took a picture of a lamppost. And on each lamppost in Central Park, there's a small metal plate, and it has like a series of numbers on it. The first 2 numbers, this is sort of like a real like insider kind of tip. The first 2 numbers correspond to which cross street you'd be at if you were outside of the park. So it tells you, it's a way to orient yourself inside of the park if you're lost. So we posted up this sort of close-up picture of this metal plate and said, if you're ever lost in the park, just find a lamppost. It'll tell you where you are. It'll sort of tell you, which way to head, and head towards the streetlights, and you'll end up going east or west and hit 5th Avenue or Central Park West. And that's like we would never really put that kind of thing in Facebook, but if you put that information in people's hands in like a visual format, it's an incredibly helpful thing to share. And that was like people responded to that inside of Gowalla and Foursquare very, very positively. So it isn't really just about like beautiful photographs, which is it's like a nice byproduct. It's more to do with sharing something that only like a real local would know that would genuinely help someone.
And it's sharing it I was going to say it's sharing it in a location that is most useful to the user, not you as the originator of that content, but you're actively thinking about where is this going to be best utilized. I can't help but have an image of a wheel with hub and spokes on it, and that each one of those networks or location-based services that you're a part of is a spoke, and this spoke is perfect for someone who would be bouncing around Central Park, for example, and that's where they would find that kind of information. No, it's
right.
You are coming at this from my perspective. You are coming at this from the perspective of the user, and what is the best way to put quality content in the user's hand, as opposed to whoever's creating it and what our aims are as an individual brand, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we don't focus too much on that kind of internal kind of conversation, but although of course it's something that we're interested in tracking and having results on and stuff, of course, but I think this idea of thinking about what you do as like an ecosystem is a very, very powerful one. And we never really have thought about the things that we do in isolation. That's why, like, YouTube is an extension of social. This is why Foursquare is an extension of what we were doing, with Zagat Survey on Corcoran.com. This is why what we're doing on Tumblr is an extension of what we're doing, on Facebook. So everything is kind of interrelated for us, and you'll see a lot of sort of sharing of content across the platforms. And while each individual platform has its own unique audience, which I think that's an aspect that's sort of lost on a lot of people in real estate. They think that, blasting the same thing out across 10 different platforms is somehow valuable, and that's never something that I've sort of subscribed to. I think like a YouTube audience is very different from a Facebook audience, for example, and they do different things and behave in different ways. But having your content interrelated and sort of having people move between the platforms just organically based on what they're interested in and what they particularly find valuable has been sort of a fascinating thing to watch grow here.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and again, the sophistication of your entire approach, the breadth and depth, and the thinking behind this, we just marvel at it. And I'm tempted to ask you about Tumblr because we've kind of touched on that topic in a few prior conversations, but I'm going to guess that we may not have time to cover that. Just as a reminder to you, Matthew, and you're probably following along, but we have 5 minutes and 20 seconds left. As always, we get through the hour and feels like 5 minutes, and we don't get to everything we wanted to talk about. So I'm going to give you the choice right now. Do you want to answer my question about Tumblr, or do you want to talk a little bit about how all these things you're doing are online, are translating the Corcoran brand online, and what makes Corcoran unique within real estate? Those are probably more valuable topics, I think. The latter, not the former.
Like.
Let's go with the latter, because I want to hear your. You've never really said this, I don't think, at least not to me, about how all this translates online and what makes Corcoran unique within real estate, because I'm sure this is a big part of your strategy. So you have 4 minutes and 30 seconds to cover that.
4 minutes to try and sum all of that up. Okay.
Sorry.
One of the things that we don't often talk about, especially in social media, is everything that we do offline. And we have a very, very large archive of beautiful advertising, and all of the tools that our agents use are on brand for mailers and printed materials, and this approach that we have, that understanding what it feels like to live in a certain in our case neighborhood within Manhattan or Brooklyn. That is an idea that we think goes beyond searching for things. And this idea of going beyond search and sort of beyond selling is really, really a key part of our differentiation that also runs through what we do online. But I think this idea that, kind of what we stand for in terms of the aesthetic of our brand, that's very, very important for us. The content behind our brand, whether that's what an agent does, what we put online, or what a public appearance would be, or something like that. This is stuff that's very, very important to us, and it's something that we spend a tremendous amount of time on and speak a lot about internally, because the quality of the content that we put out is our brand in many ways, whether that's the service that an agent provides or a status update in Facebook. So this idea of like going beyond selling, and you and I have spoken about this idea that what it feels like to live in a neighborhood, you can never get that from a set of search results. That has to be an organic thing that's actually built kind of over time. And this is why social media is really powerful for us, because it allows us to do that. So that's really just sort of the kind of tip of the iceberg of how we go about doing things. But that's indicative of our approach, I think.
Yeah, and I love your comment about going beyond search and beyond selling, because I could probably off the top of my head rattle off 10 things that I've learned from you / the Corcoran Group that are valuable to me, very valuable. And number one or two would probably be that everything that you're doing that I see does go beyond search and beyond selling, and it is different, and it does create differentiation, and it is refreshing, and it is sometimes entertaining. The production values are extremely high, and all of that adds up for me personally. And I know everybody's different, but it speaks to me as a consumer. You know, I try to look at everything as a consumer, not as your competitor or as a real estate person. I try to step outside, you know, the biases that have been built within me over the years because I'm in the industry, and I really try to look at things as freshly as I can. I know none of us are truly objective, but you know, everything that you're doing just speaks to me, and you know, one of the reasons why we love having you on the show and we love being your friend in real life and online is because, you know, it's just your DNA is our DNA on all of those levels. And I just think you're probably attracting like-minded people who really appreciate all that stuff, and they appreciate the fact that you don't really ever look like you're selling anything.
You know, we're having so much fun doing this kind of stuff, and you know, I can't thank you enough for you know, all the kind words that you say about the work that we do here. It's phenomenal to hear. You know, it's very interesting to get calls from people outside of real estate. You know, that's for sure. You know, I was at a panel a couple of weeks ago. You know, and I was in a discussion with the person from Radio Shack who does what I do, but at Radio Shack, and it was the two of us together talking about the importance of loyalty, this idea of digital loyalty. And you know, you would never have thought to put Corcoran and Radio Shack together on the same panel, but it was you know, it was a fascinating discussion, and you'd be amazed how other industries are struggling with the same problems as the real estate industry.
Yeah, and we've actually run past our time, Matthew. I apologize. I didn't have an opportunity to thank you for coming on the show. We're off air now, but I just, you know, I'll just personally tell you how much, again, we appreciate your coming on the air. Obviously, you got to come back for a fourth time, probably like next week. No, but seriously, we learned so much. We so appreciate your friendship and your you know, your professional colleagueism, if that's a word, which I know it's not. But we just thank you because you've added such a you know, such another dimension to our shows and the quality of our shows and the quality of the content of our shows, and so we just want to thank you personally, professionally, on every level. And I can't wait to see you in San Francisco in exactly 1 month.
It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be great. Thank you very much for inviting me, guys.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Matthew. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.